to record it in my own voice as Lydia's cousin Jack suggested, and then let Lydia listen to that, my voice, and then perhaps rewrite it after I record it.
The first of many letters, again. Dear Lydia, off and on for many years I've been writing things for you, thoughts of all kinds. They are scattered in various notebooks. My handwriting isn't great and deteriorates quickly. I prefer to send you handwritten letters. In this case, if they can't be read, what good would come? I'm not a good writer nor a reader as you. Please excuse as it takes a few letters before the writing improves. Please bear with me. I'm not sure where to start with this letter. I've had thoughts in my head and think about you often. All good thoughts for sure. I miss our bantering together and just hanging out with you. You're fun to be with and your witty sense of humor. Fanfare for the common man. In case I don't give you a chance to give you these writings personally, I've asked Jack to pass them along to you, and if not, Alex Lim will have these. Dagnabbit, I'd prefer to hand these letters to you myself and sit in a nearby room while you read them. That would be best. It's important for you to know how you are connected to me and connected to our family, your importance, and so I write. North by Northwest. Unexpectedly, I returned to Iowa. It's been 5 years. From Vancouver, I'd been staying with my dad's cousin, Carol Erickson, in Lecounter, and her interesting husband, Corky, who succumbed to his age with COVID. A great old guy who had trouble talking because of a stroke. He still managed an interesting conversation, especially if about his younger days. He built and co-owned the Sky Ride at the Seattle World's Fair. You never know who you're related to. I moved into their basement apartment. At 85, Corky built a handrail for the path around the side of the house I could hold on to. He built the 25-foot handrail in one day. I was amazed. In his younger days, he would build ski lifts. I asked him how many people it took to put up a ski lift. Just two, he replied. No wonder so agile at 85. Carol and Corky were a great old couple, and I enjoyed conversations with them. She was my dad's first cousin from my dad's Undum side of the family. First cousin once removed, I met her three children, spouses, and grandkids who lived between Lecounter and Seattle. A fun group. I was fortunate they tolerated me and my art studio in Bellingham until it was time to leave. Closing my cool little art studio I had opened only weeks after I last saw you. The end of celluloid. Working on feature films is no longer of interest to me. Well, for long runs. No longer able to work the overtime, having burned myself out for too many years. As one of the HR managers told me with a shrug, we work these people to death and then let them go when they burn out. Watch my dad age with his career in Motorola prepared me for growing old in a technology career. Physically, my dad was no longer able to keep pace with the younger crew, and he couldn't bridge the technology change. As with my dad, I knew the same would happen to me. I thank my father for at least demonstrating this to me. He hadn't been prepared, but he showed me that I should be. By the time we moved to Dallas from Los Angeles, I was ready for this inevitability. I could no longer take the required killer overtime. Yet for quick cash, I was sucked back to work on one film, then another. My history is packed with wounds from battles I wish I would have gone better, skirmishes within myself over what I wish I would have done. That happens when you want an adventure, setting one foot in front of the other into the fog that comes next. Back to Iowa. My sister had been urging me to come back to Iowa for a while. At the time I returned, I thought I was actually getting along with her. I hadn't realized that she had her own agenda for me coming back. And in the end, I suppose she succeeded, but not the way she would have preferred. There's not much work for me in the Ames area. Before I left Bellingham, I contacted Anson Call, one of the graphic design teachers at Iowa State. A great guy I had met when I returned to talk to his students as an alumni years before. I had talked with him about a personal project I wanted to work on. Anson suggested I do this while working on an MFA. Several stones, a flock of birds. My status as a university teacher was always crippled by only having an MA in art and design, meaning I could never be promoted to a good position without the terminal MFA, an incentive if I wanted to teach. As a graduate student, I could get free health care and all of my tuition covered, and just before moving back, I got two remote teaching jobs I could do from anywhere.
Well, I'm kind of rambling in my thoughts. I need a few letters to ease into the topics which are more important.
All things must pass. Liquidating my art studio in Bellingham wasn't easy. You always lose when you move. A great workspace with a small office I made into a gallery at the entrance. The building in Bellingham was pretty cool. An old metal barn converted into small shops, mostly surfaces. It was hard to leave. My freelance business wasn't booming. The transition from a big company back to a small shop wasn't easy. My legs no longer allowed me to hustle work as I had enjoyed doing before. On my own, I would have to cover all aspects of the project, and a level of expectation of small shop work had grown in my absence. There were new skills I was learning, like camera tracking, and to relearn how to model geometry, which I had forgotten, plus all the Adobe tools. More important was working on my design skills. The process of design had been a thing I loved in my early school days throughout the Hong Kong and Singapore years. But the big studios had their own designers, and my skills became rusty. Learning again was interesting, especially working on lettering. I'd not touched a calligraphy pen much in many years, and it was the hand muscle memory skills to relearn. The third stone. Going back to school as a graduate student, I could revive my knowledge of the graphic and design principles and elements, plus the new graphic design software, while my guitar gently weeps. On my first Vancouver tour, a doctor recommended mends for the arthritis in my left hip, and it worked really well. I could do laps around the office. The side effect was losing 60% of my hearing pitch. It was stated on the fine print of the Pfizer packaging. Do you hear tingling ears? The doctor said during a checkup about the meds. So do I. I'm taking the medicine, he replied to my affirmation. The fine print states that hearing ringing could make you one of the not so small percent who could lose their hearing. But he didn't tell me that. Everything now sounds like treble turned all the way down, and I have trouble understanding what most people say without my hearing aids. Like Grandma, I will reply, 230? Nice work, Doc. Temporary pain relief in exchange for permanent hearing damage. What a deal. I no longer take pain meds. Even temporary relief. The temporary relief, even Tylenol, isn't worth the reverse side pain kick. And so, the sound of my guitars has changed. The worst was the banjo and that beautiful blonde Benedito. They sounded horrible. The beauty of the sound was gone. It gets better. In 2017, I twisted my left wrist the wrong way. Stupidly, I didn't go see a doctor. See above experience. The sprain was so bad I figured I would never play guitar again. Too painful even to make a simple chord. The pain didn't go away after months. Combined with the hearing loss, I decided to sell most of the guitars. I kept the acoustic, which my mom's friend Peter Krunhart made for me, and the black jazz guitar, which always had a dark sound, and was the only one which sounded the same after my hearing extravaganza. It wasn't the most expensive one I had, but it had the best playing neck out of all of them. So I packed them back into my Honda for the drive to Iowa. Hit the road, Jack. My life inside a box. That's the bad side of moving around so much. After a while, I stopped hanging pictures on the walls. Decorating with Cardboard by Garman Herigstad. Well, at least I'm not a musician that has to move to a new city every day. Return to sender. Lydia, you've always been on my mind. I was thinking about you while I was packing up. I wanted to send you some things, only to find out you had moved from Eugene to Los Angeles. I was thinking about you all the while I was working in Thailand, the whole time I was there. Back then, I was thinking only a few months of this and I'll be back with Lydia. But working projects kept stretching on. Once my Australian boss in Bangkok asked if someone wanted to take an overnight trip to Hong Kong to pick up some video equipment. I jumped at the chance just so I could see you for a couple of hours before you went to sleep. I was back on the first flight out in the morning, and well worth it. The next company I went to was a Thai television studio. I wanted to see you and decided I would leave one of the best salary jobs I had had. I decided I'd had enough, and I broke my contract with that Thai company to move to Singapore. One of the better decisions I ever made in my life. The entire reason for going to Singapore was to be with you. I figured Singapore would be a neutral ground, not Hong Kong and not Bangkok. It sounds like I might be leaving out details which you don't remember, or maybe were never aware of. And for the most part, it was a success. I was back with you, with very rare trips out of town the entire 2 years plus we were there. Singapore was great for being with you, but things with your mom never really recovered. Get back, Loretta. Back to my move from Washington to Iowa. With the element fully packed and enough rearview mirror coverage to avoid getting a ticket, I headed back to Roland in July of 2018, a place I never thought I would return to live. It was a beautiful drive over the Cascades and the Rocky Mountains of northern Idaho. I drove the length of Idaho from north to south and got talked into spending a few days with my old high school Iowa State friend Pam Hutchison and her husband Tom. I learned more about soil for potatoes and how french fries are cut up than I'll ever need to know. But I was captivated the way they talked about it. They had such a great interest. The rock formations in southern Wyoming are incredible. I suppose you saw those when you drove out to Eugene. But as I drove east, the Nebraska Great Plains started to smell sweet as I got closer to where I grew up. I didn't think taking pictures would do justice to the beautiful sights. I kept my eyes open and on the tachometer to avoid overheating my Honda Element crossing the Continental Divide. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. I pulled into the driveway in Roland, the return after 30 years of roaming the earth. I didn't think it was going to be easy back in Iowa, work-wise, nor with my mom or sister. I felt I was returning with my tail between my legs. I didn't really want to go see my old friends who were still around, who would be wondering why I was moving back into my mom's house. At least I did have some work to do. I set up my computer and finished my application for the small semester at Iowa State, which would start just days away. I was accepted and started teaching the second year graphic design students, along with taking my graduate design classes. And I was older than all but one of my teachers. The teachers were fantastic, and I really learned a lot. Going back to school after a career can really open up the mind for learning. I was soaking up new things I wanted to explore and refresh skills laid by the wayside. Carnival 9. Teaching at ISU was not as I had hoped. The students were not as motivated as the students I had in Dallas nor Savannah, nor as professionally minded as the crew I was teaching in Vancouver while working at the movie studio. I think it's a combination of no child left behind, smartphones, and a sense of entitlement wasn't around a few years before. The faculty told me that students were not as they had been 10 or more years before. They were maturing later out of the gate. But that's another rant for another day. Whole lot of love. As I wrote earlier, please bear with me.
I checked if it should be spelled bear or bear.
My thoughts are meandering, and I'm trying to write myself into saying something important. I revised this letter after I revised the third letter I wrote to you, so I know what's coming up. I know it's going to take a while to get into the habit of writing better. And I hope you can tolerate the graphic design look I'm using. I'm trying to use those new graphic design skills I learned while a grad student. I love you, Lydia. Your dad.